Hello and welcome back to the class of research methodology. I'm Dr. Richa Pandit and I'll continue my discussion on a causal research design. In the previous tutorial, I briefed about a causal research design with the difference in the three basic research design: exploratory, demographic, and conclusive. And we also understand the concept of causality with internal and external validity and laboratory versus field experiment. Today we are going to talk about a classical experimental design and a statistical experimental design. Now, classical experimental design, the first category is a pre-experimental design, which is exploratory in nature. And this experimental design helps the researcher to frame the hypothesis about the causal relationship between the independent and a dependent variable. Again, pre-experimental research design is bifurcated into the four very commonly used research design. Let us look at each of them one after another. First, one group after only design. In this pre-experimental design, only one test group, in a simple word, only one group of a respondent is exposed to the treatment to measure the impact of independent variable on the dependent variable. Second, one group before after design. Here, first observations or the research insights were taken without exposing test unit to any experiment. Respondents were not given any experiment, but rather data were collected directly from them without exposing them to the research field. And second, after exposing them to the research treatment, like after taking them to a mall, their satisfaction level or their perception level is being measured. So this is one group, but before after design. Non-match with control group design. Here, another set of a group or another control group is introduced into the experiment, and this control group does not receive any treatment while the experimentation takes place. So, the treatment effect is determined between the observation of experimental group and the observation collected from the control group. So, non-match with a control group design is basically understand with these characteristics. Third, match with a control group design. Now, when experimental group and a control group taken together, there are chances of a biasness in the result. So to avoid such problem, control group design involved in matching the experimental group on the basis of a relevant characteristics, which means the selection of the control group and the experimental group is done in a way which defines some similarities in the profiling of the people doing a research as a part of a control group or an experimental group. Second type of the classical experimental design is a true experimental design. Here, the key term to understand is a randomization. This experimental design involved a randomization or a random assignment of the test unit to the experimental group to understand the research in detail. Again, this true experimental design is classified as two group before after design, two group after only design, and Solomon four group design. First, two group before after design. Here, the test unit assigned to the experimental group, which means a are respondent are allowed to be a part of an experimental group based on the process of a randomization with the use of a random table. A random assignment of the test unit to the experimental group takes place. Another important term to understand is the control group is treated with the extraneous variable and not with the experimental design. So here, the control environment takes the extraneous variable also into the consideration, and then the impact is basically been computed. Next, two group only after only design. Again, it is very much similar to the match with a control group design, but the only difference is the assignment of the unit to the experimental group. Here, as a name suggests, a randomization or the use of the random table is done to assign the unit to the experimental group, which try to avoid the selection biasness and mortality into the research. Next, Solomon 4 group design. Now, to handle the problem of two supplement group and a before after design is a supplement only after and is referred as a Solomon 4 group design. Now, here in this particular design, 4 by 6 group study is basically been considered. Next, Quasi-Experimental Design. Now, here researcher in this particular design does not have a full control when and whom the experimentation and the non-random selection of the group member takes place. This quasi-experimental design in a simple word is similar to the convenience sampling wherein, depending upon the conveniency of the researcher, identification of the test unit and assignment of the test unit to the different experimental group takes place. And that is why this is very less expensive research design and also saves the time. Now, widely used quasi-experimental research design are time series and multiple time series. Let us understand what is time series. Now, in this particular thing, a periodic measurement of the dependent variable comprises of the test unit takes place. A customer satisfaction towards a product is measured in a periodic way after a certain interval of the time is a part of a time series design. This is the graphical representation of the time series design wherein the first observation were collected before the treatment applied to the experimental group, when the treatment is given to the experimental group, and last observations were collected once the treatment get over towards the experimental group. Now, multiple time series design. Again, in this design, another group of the test unit incorporated to the control group, and various periodic results were taken considering the control group and the experimental group together. Now we are moving towards the last part of the experimental design, and that is a statistical experimental design. As the name suggests, it involves the use of the experiment to statistically control the extraneous variable and to measure the impact of multiple independent variable on the dependent variable. Three design we need to understand as a part of the statistical experimental design: completely randomized design, randomized block design, Latin square design, and a factorial design. Completely randomized design, also known as analysis of variance, ANOVA. Here, the experimental treatment are randomly assigned to the test unit, and a mean difference in the test result is basically being measured. So I want to check the influence of demographic variable on a customer's loyalty towards a known perfume brand. So age wise, whether the loyalty gets differ or not is checked with a completely randomized design. Randomized block design, again, This design also involved the random assignment of the treatment to the experimental and control group both. So it is a combination of randomization and matching. And control variable define the group and the randomized experiment is conducted within the group. Let us understand this in detail. This is a symbolic representation of the randomized block design, wherein difference in the sales in the four different price level 1, 2, 3 and 4 is measured against the four selected geographical region, and this gives us the representation of 4 by 4 geographic region against four different price level. And two research hypotheses are framed based on the randomized block design, considering the example. Number 1, whether the sales gets generated differ from one region to another region. So here for the purpose of study, north, west, east and south, four regions are taken for the purpose of study, and the price level against the region were tested. And second, whether the price level also gets differ in terms of generating the sales. So each cell in the randomized table represents independent variable in the randomized block design. Now let us come to the Latin square design. It allows the researcher to control the two external variables which are non-interacting with each other like age and gender while manipulating the independent variable. Here the test unit are grouped according to the two external variables like a size of showroom for example and basis of the difference in the quarterly sale of the company. Now in addition to the variable that is taken a size of a showroom, another one more region added to this is a south region of a showroom. And against this, the difference in the sales volume is measured. So the company has four different sizes of the showroom and the design is based on the two external variable, region and a size of showroom. Here it is important to understand that the region and a size of showroom does not interact with each other. So they are non-interacting variable represented in this particular table. So four different region against the four different showroom size presented in the research design named as a Latin square research design, and each cell is treated with only one treatment like a price level 1, 2, 3, 4. And the last statistical experimental design is a factorial research design. Now, so far only the effect of one independent variable on a dependent variable were studied in the previous experimental design. But this research design allows the researcher to study one or two or more experimental variable simultaneously in a structured manner. So if an FMCG company wants to test a new product in 30 cities, considering the higher income group, middle income group, lower income group, along with the high and a moderate price level. So this will lead to 3 by 2 factorial design, 3 different table of income and 2 different treatment level in terms of the price, high and the moderate price. This gives us the 6 different experimental group: high income, high price, high income, moderate price, middle income, higher price, so on and so forth. And this gives us the result in this particular table, wherein the main impact of the income level on a sale and a price level on a sale is basically been measured. So the interaction takes place between two or more variable simultaneously. So this were the end of the experimental design. But before I end, I just want to talk about certain limitation which include time, cost, secrecy, very important thing, because in a before and after experimental design, the test unit is exposed to the same set of the treatment before and after. So secrecy of a data is another limitation of the experimental design and the implementation part. Now, the last part that I want to talk about is a test marketing. Test marketing means conducting the experiment into the field. It is classified as a standard, controlled, electronic, and simulated. So the standard test market company use the own distribution channel to test the new product, which means the product is introduced to the existing sales or the distribution channel. Second, control set of the market, wherein the company organization hires the research agency to conduct the study. Electronic test market, consumers were asked for the permission to be a part of the research, and those who agreed were introduced to the research project, and the observations and the findings been taken from those consumers. And last, simulated test market, also known as an artificial technique of the test marketing, wherein under all the controlled environmental condition, the research takes place or the research experimentation takes place with respect to the introduction of new product or a competitive product to study the market stimuli. So here I end my talk on a causal research design. At the end, I would like to mention the book that I have referred is a marketing research by Naresh Malhotra. Thank you very much.